Thank you. So I do apologize. My voice is a little bit messed up right now, so I hope this is okay for all of you. So first I want to say thank you for coming. And I wanted to just kind of tell a little bit of a story about how we got here. 2007-ish, I ran my first marathon, and it was in that time frame. So I had an opportunity, I had a connection, somebody that got me a waiver to run the Boston Marathon, and it was a really great experience for me. And later that year, after I had run the marathon, I reached back out to that connection, and I said, I have an idea. I'd really love to be able to connect some Genzyme employees to the Boston Marathon and do something with that. Not just run the marathon like I did in 2007, but actually try to make a difference. And so I'll tell you about the agenda in a minute, but at that time, I reached out to Jamie Ring, who is here, and she'll be talking later, and said, what can we do? How can we together pull some people together, run the marathon, and really do it in a way to make a difference? And so it was interesting at the time. So I worked in Alston, and I still work in Alston, and I'm celebrating my 20th year in Alston. But at the time, we had 3 products that we were making in Alston. We were making Cerezyme for the treatment of Gaucher disease, Myozyme for Pompe disease, Fabrazyme for Fabry disease. So you thought about it and said, all right, we're going to pull these Alston people together, and we're going to do something to make a difference. Who do we pick? You know, do we pick a Genzyme-treated community? Do we try to raise money for the Gaucher Foundation, the Pompe Foundation? Well, there were 2 different Pompe foundations, and there's a Fabry group, and it's like, you know, how do you figure that out? And so that really wasn't anything we ever thought to do, was those people had a Genzyme. The people that are treated by Genzyme products have a Genzyme, they have a treatment. And so I reached out to Jamie and said, so what do we do? How do we do this? And it was Jamie's suggestion that we think about NORD, and we think about celebrating or representing all rare disease communities and what we do. So we did it, and it was a wonderful year. That year in Alston, it was not only a great year, it was a lot of the challenges we've had of late, but it was a wonderful year. 4 runners, and we raised about $22,000. The site was engaged, everybody was inspired. It was really a wonderful time then. And it worked, and it just worked. It was such a wonderful thing that we were doing. And so look at us today. So I'll spare you the details about what we did in 2009 and 10, 11, and 12. And I'll just say, here we are getting ready for 2015, and we started with 4. And I have a list of 95 people that are inspired and want to be a part of what we're doing. And oh my God, it's just so exciting. So it's hard for me to think of a word, right? So I could say, well, I'm speechless here, but anybody who really knows me knows that's not happening. But so I'm not shocked, because I really believed what we were doing was a big deal. But when the board, who I'll introduce in a second, when we started to talk about how we were going to grow, we just knew there was really no opportunity to grow with just the Boston Marathon. And you know the deal, right? The Boston Marathon, it's the World Series of marathons. Everybody wants to run it. You have to raise a ton of money to be able to get a waiver, and you need affiliations with the Boston Athletic Association and blah, 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 right? It's a hard thing to navigate, and there's absolutely no opportunity to grow. So when we ever decided to go down the road of expanding the team in Providence, we didn't know what we were going to get. this is a hard thing to do. For a lot of runners, it's just Providence. It's not the Boston Marathon. And so what I was surprised to see and surprised to learn as we went through this and started to get people engaged and people that were interested. Not only did I have the numbers, so I want to make sure I say them right. Not only did the 37 Genzyme people express interest in not only being a part of Boston and Providence, but also the 11 Sanofi people and the 16 members of the rare disease community were interested, and the 10 friends and family members of people in this room, and 19 members of partner companies like New England Controls and Emerson Process Management wanted to be involved in what we're doing. So today we have 95 or so people, and that list is growing every day. Just today, an hour ago, Sarah, wherever Sarah is, Sarah was talking to me about possibly other people joining the running. So, wow, just a great. It's great to stand up here and welcome you to what we're doing tonight. Okay, so I don't have a lot more to say there, but I do want to say a couple of things about what we're doing here in this community. So the reason we did this, the reason we brought everybody here together at this site is to start, when you grow from 30, which is what we were last year, to 95, I get a little anxiety about diluting what was great about what we were doing, okay? So I want you guys to get to know each other. I want you guys to get to know each other as a running team. I want you guys to get to know each other as a community. So that's why we did this. So I know the tendency is to sit with the people you know and be comfortable. Step out of your comfort zone a little bit and get to know other runners and get to know the other community members here, because that's what this is about. It's connecting as a community, and it's not trivial. It's not simple. It takes work. Every runner that's here is expected to make an effort, a real effort, to connect with ultimately with their patient partner. Okay, that's not an ask. It's really a requirement. It's something that is in that application that you wrote, that you filled out. It's like, we want you to build a relationship here. We don't want this to be symbolic, right? And because it will benefit you tremendously as you go through this. That's what we want. And for you community members with the orange lanyards, the same thing goes for you, right? This isn't symbolic. This is special. This is something that we want you to work at it. So just keep that in mind as we go through the night, and that when we break at 7:30, just really remember that this is about connecting as a greater community. Okay. To help with that connection, I'm just going to introduce some people. So would the board please stand? So you guys have seen some emails from these people, so I just wanted to put some faces to those names. So there's Kylie and Simon. You could sit. Jessica Cohen, Amy Atwood, Andrew Scholta, Marissa Poole, and Shane Zakowski. So this is the board that makes it all happen. This is a wonderful group of people, and I encourage you all, reach. Ask us to do anything. We're here. We'll make this work, okay? We will make this work. So another gentleman I want to introduce is Jack Pryor back there. Jack sits behind the scenes. He's been around since day one, and he's involved in all things technology. So as you start to get involved with the website and making and hearing a lot about that later, Jax will be involved there. There are other people in the room. I'm not going to introduce you by name, but I want you to stand if you were previously a member of this marathon team. Stand. Okay, so these are the guys that have been here before. They know what this is all about, and people that are very willing, I'll speak on your behalf, very willing to help to navigate this. So reach out to these guys and get to know them. They'll help with what we're doing here. And then I'll introduce some other people here. So we have the Sparrow family and my very dear friend Shauna, who you'll hear from later, representing the Rothman-Thompson syndrome community. We have a new family that's joining us this year, the DeAngelis family, and Stephen.
You'll remember.
Representing the Braselli syndrome community. We have returning from last year, Natalie Mazaskaya, Jackson Weiss community. We have Eileen Linzer here, who will speak later, representing Demon Pick community. We have, where's Christopher? Christopher Johnson and the Johnson family, representing the congenital hyperinsulinism community. We have Gina DeSanzo back here, and she's representing, stop. Langerhans cell histiocytosis syndrome. We have Gail Rosenberg representing the idiopathic hypoparathyroidism community. Okay, so is that and Sarah Kacharsky representing the fibromuscular dysplasia community. Sorry, I'm working on the names. Is that, did I get everybody? Did I get everybody? Okay, so so that is our community. There are a lot of people that aren't here tonight, so we're videoing obviously this event, and we'll get that out to everybody. So for the remainder of the evening, we have first we're going to hear from Shauna, then we're going to hear from Jamie, Rain from Patient Advocacy. We're going to hear from Pamela Gavin from NORD. We're going to hear from Rachel Ramoni from the National Institute. She's Executive Director of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And then we'll finish up with Eileen. And so once we're done there, we're going to leave this room. We'll have a little bit of a break in this room. And then the running team will go next door to this room, and we'll have a running team logistics meeting. Okay? Anybody have a question before we start? Okay. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shauna Sparrow.
A very rare disease called Rothman-Thompson syndrome. I feel very grateful for being a part of Genzyme's Running for Rare Diseases. Everyone made this a great experience for me last year. I want to share a bit about meeting your patient partner and connecting with them. I had some great experience of connecting, and I'd like to share them with you. Here's my story of connecting with my runner, Beth Songer. I was very nervous when I was first going to meet Beth, but at the same time, I was excited too. My mother tried to make it easier by having me write down 10 things about myself to share with Beth. This gave Beth information about me and also gave us something to talk about. As Beth went through the list and made connections, I already knew we were starting to connect. Surprisingly, a few days later, I received a letter back from her saying 10 things about her. My first ways to connect. Visit each other or FaceTime and maybe write some things about yourself to share with your patient partner. I also had a great way of connecting with Kelsey, another runner that was running for my pal Eli, who also had RTS. Here's my story with Kelsey. When I first met Kelsey, which was at one of the practice runs, she really wanted to take pictures with funny faces, which was right up my alley. She kept making jokes and saying funny stuff that made me laugh. She was also wearing a pink wig. My second way is to connect. Take funny pictures and be funny and goofy to make your partner laugh. Phil was just the one that helped me learn how to connect. Here's my favorite stories of connecting. When I met Phil at a practice run, he crouched down at my ground level so we were able to talk with good eye contact. I never really thought about it, but talking to him this way made me feel very comfortable. We talked about each other and how I felt about this so far. My last way is to connect. Go down to your partner's ground level and get good eye contact. Sometimes running for rare diseases is wonderful, and I only have great things to say about it. I just have one last way of connecting. Be yourself. Once you be yourself, your partner will show you who they are back to you. I think this way of connecting is a great way of connecting with your partner. Good luck, everyone. I hope your experience is as wonderful as mine was last year. Thank you for inviting me back.
Okay, I'd like to introduce now Jamie Ring, who, as I said before, Jamie has been around since day one with me with this whole effort. She is with the Patient Advocacy Department at Genzyme, and welcome, Jamie.
Is it working? Shauna, it's a very tough act to follow. People always say that, but I really mean it. So I'll do my best. Phil, thanks for inviting me here tonight to speak with all of you. I feel a little bit like a fraud because I've been involved in this, from day one, really, but I've never run. I'm not a runner. I am running my second 5K in a few weeks, so we'll see how I do, and maybe next year I'll be here in a different capacity. But I work in Genzyme's Patient Advocacy Department, which has been a function at Genzyme for almost 15 years now. And I thought I might tell a little bit of a story about Genzyme's early days. Genzyme's very much a culture of storytelling. That's how we transfer history and knowledge and how we help each other to do our work better by sharing stories from the past. And as I was coming here, I was thinking about, this event that happened in our earliest of days, which to me really embodies the spirit of partnering and how it really is a part of our culture. And it's amazing that we have NIH and NORD here as well as part of this initiative because this story actually involves them. But in the very early days when Genzyme was what you would consider a startup company back in the 1980s, we were working on our first real, exciting potential treatment for a rare disease, and it was a disease called Gaucher disease, and the treatment was Ceridase. And the original clinical trial, which was done in partnership with NIH, because Dr. Roscoe Brady from NIH was one of the major contributors to this potential treatment, the NIH was involved in the study, and the study had just a very few number of patients, as many rare disease trials do. And in the end, when we were looking at the results of that study, it didn't look like it was all that successful, in fact. And it was actually quite disappointing for the people who were participating because there was so much excitement that we may have a treatment for a rare disease and for a lysosomal storage disorder. Except there was one patient in that trial who was being treated by Dr. Brady, and his name was Brian, and he was a little boy. And Brian actually did seem to show some improvement. And when we talked to Brian's mother, it was undoubted, in her mind that this treatment was doing something. And ultimately, it was determined that the treatment did work in Brian because Brian was a child and he was smaller and he was getting a more appropriate dose of Ceridase than the adults who were in the study. But at the time, Genzyme was a startup and we didn't have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and this trial was a big investment, and things were really looking a little bit, challenging because it wasn't really successful. And Brian's mother, Robin, went on the road with our CEO at the time, Henry Termier, and she went to all these different investor meetings with him and compelled people to keep funding Genzyme, to keep funding this research, to consider moving this trial, doing the trial again, and moving forward with this compound. And I think many of us, when we hear this story, realize that without the conviction and the heart and the soul of Robin, it's quite possible that none of this would be here today, that the treatments we have for the rare diseases may not exist, that Genzyme would not be the leader in trying to help support rare diseases that we aspire to be every day. And I think the point is there are so many wonderful unintended consequences that come out of partnerships. Again, we've been a partner with NIH from day one. We've been a partner, NORD has been a partner to us for so many years and through so many challenges and ups and downs and unprecedented situations. And so if you just are open to what's possible with partnering, it's really amazing what can come out of that. And you know, for all of the runners, you know, you inspire us. For those of you who are employees, we're all behind you, and we're so impressed with, you know, how you push yourselves. And for the families that participate, it takes such courage to share your stories. It takes such courage to stand up and be willing and open to tell the world about what you've been through and what you've lost and what you've endured. And it's really our privilege to help shine a light on the experiences of people living with rare diseases. And so it's a project that we're all so proud of, and I can't even begin to tell you, we never thought it could get to where it is today. And I think about 5 years from now and 10 years from now, what this may be. And I work in a global capacity, so I work with patients all around the world, many of whom still don't have a diagnosis, many of whom have no groups like NORD and no support and not even a center that can properly take care of them. So the need for raising awareness for rare diseases is so great, and this is such an incredible way to bring that visibility and again to shine a light on the journey of the rare disease experience, because every person living with a rare disease deserves support, they deserve treatment, they deserve a diagnosis, and I think that this is such an incredible step in getting that for everyone who needs it. So you have my sincere appreciation and my admiration, and you know, again, as a company, this is, I think, what makes Genzyme such an incredible place to work, that this kind of thing can happen, and that this kind of partnering exists. So I wish everyone luck. I will see you out on the different courses. You'll hear me cheering loudly, and thank you again for including me tonight.
Now I'd like to introduce Pam Gavin, who is from the NORD office. Pam, you're actually at the NORD office in Quincy. So fairly recently, like 3 years?
2 years.
2 years, that NORD has a local location in Quincy, and they're based out of Danbury, Connecticut, but this has enabled us to really develop a relationship with NORD. So my pleasure to introduce Pam Gavin.
Thank you, Phil. Good evening, everybody. I've got a little cheat sheets just so that I don't talk too much, because I'm so passionate about what it is that you're doing, and the moment I get in a room with people like you, I can go on. So I will try not to do that because I've got a wonderful person to introduce to you. But before I do that, Jamie suggested I share with some of you who don't know very much about NORD a few sentences about the National Organization for Rare Disorders. It's an advocacy organization that was established over 31 years ago by people very similar to you in the room, patients, parents, advocates who were looking to get Congress to pass a law to incentivize companies to invest in and pay attention to small populations, because prior to this Orphan Drug Act that ultimately got established, it was very difficult to get companies to spend the money, and it's quite logical to understand that is not a financial viable option. So with the help, so if I go to a couple of comments that Jamie mentioned about partnership, which is a big focus for tonight, with the partnership of people in Congress, of people in the community, of clinicians, a little help from Jack Klugman and his brother who had a rare disease, and writing shows in Hollywood that focused on it. The partnership came together, and ultimately the law was passed 30 years ago, and it's amazing to see where we are today relative to that and the progress that was made. So I'll just say that, so NORD's been around for 30-something years. We have 3 offices. as Phil said, one here in Massachusetts, and we're absolutely so thrilled to be working on this amazing program with all of you runners and the families, and bringing the teams together, because there's such unmet medical need and social need, and you all are making a huge difference in that regard. And I can speak from my own personal family experience. I would never dream to be standing here today, a part of this incredible movement, and I can just speak for not just NORD, but all its members, how grateful we are for the hard work and the commitment that you've expressed in the past, and those new folks who are joining this year. Just want to say thank you. So without further ado, I'd like to say just a few words about Rachel Ramoni, who is, it gives me great pleasure to introduce her. For those of you who don't know, Rachel is a dentist and epidemiologist who, with that kind of background, spent a lot of time, as you can imagine, in school for both of those things. But she doesn't practice either right now. Instead, she is thrilled to be the executive director of the Coordinating Center for the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. It will be based, or it is based, here in the Center for Biomedical Informatics at Harvard Medical School. So being a Bostonian, I'm thrilled to see that happening in my local backyard. And this network is really based upon a very important program that NORD advocated for many, many years. And that is the undiagnosed clinical site at NIH. And for those of you who may not know, NORD's had a call center for years, and we would get hundreds of calls a month from patients and families that were struggling with a diagnosis. Heart-wrenching and conversations, and our staff really had no place to really direct them. That's one of the things we do, is try to connect them to other experts and other resources in the community. And we didn't have anything any place to send people until the first clinical site was established at NIH. So that for us was a relief, and we were one of the biggest referrals, and of course we had more to refer than they had the resources to satisfy. So now we are completely ecstatic over the idea that this wonderful site would be expanded so that we could help more people. And we are really thrilled that as a team of runners, you're fundraising to help pay for and subsidize the costs of some of the testing that the patients and families so desperately need that are going to be running through this program. So without further delay, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to Rachel Ramoni.
Hi. I feel like this is some kind of karma, me being here, because not a good karma. It's a karma that happened because I used to live in Coolidge Corner, and I went to dental school and the School of Public Health over the Longwood Medical area. And you know what's between my house and my school and work is the marathon. And so, not being a very physical person, every year I'd fantasize about bringing out like a blow-up couch out by the marathon road and waggling junk food in front of the runners, which was terrible, but because they cut me off from getting to school and work. But here I am, humbled and thanking you for doing exactly the thing I fantasize about, waggling junk food, and you've got a little bit of it over there, I've got to say. So here I am to thank you for running for the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. As Pam mentioned, this is an outgrowth of a program that began in 2008 at the NIH that just started with $280,000, really a shoestring budget, and now has expanded to include the NIH, 6 clinical sites around the country, 2 sequencing cores, a coordinating center, and we'll soon have an animal models facility, and will be a $140 million program, which is pretty incredible, and we're expected to see at least 1,600 patients over the next 4 years. So you might say, well, with all of that $140 million, you know, what is running for Rare doing? And so I'll tell you quite directly, there are certain things that we can't pay for, namely people who are applying to the program but who need X or Y or Z test in order to in order to determine that they're a good fit for the program. And if their insurance won't cover that, or if they don't have insurance, this is where a fund like the Running for Rare NORD Fund comes in to help. Also, as we expand to other clinical sites, we're exploring different models for evaluating undiagnosed diseases patients, some of which include using insurance to pay for the clinically necessary tests. And with that comes along co-pays and out-of-pocket expenses that we are, by law, forbidden from reimbursing, because that's viewed as an inducement and a kickback to getting medical care. So, and those, as you know, can run up until $12,000 per family. So this is where a fund like NORD is a real lifeline for families who otherwise wouldn't be able to access the program. Now, with that said, I do want to assure you that people without insurance, this is only a problem for people with insurance, oddly enough. For people without insurance, that's where the $140 million can help fully cover their care. So nobody will be turned away, thanks to the $140 million and thanks to you from participating in the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. So, but I also want to tell you a more human side to the story, and this is something I learned from our patient advisor, whose name is Matt Knight. Matt is a computer scientist from the University of Utah, and but when he's with us, he introduces himself. He has on his name as Dad, because he's a dad. He's a dad to 3 children called Bertrand, Victoria, and Winston, and they've gotten a lot of attention recently. The New Yorker wrote up a story about them because of all the work that Matt and his wife Christina had done to find a diagnosis for Bertrand, their first child. And you may have read that story. And so Bertrand, it was said in the New Yorker article, he was named for Bertrand Russell, and who was, you know, the British political activist and philosopher and mathematician and rabble-rouser. And Bertrand Knight was born in 2007, and just a few weeks of age, he began to worry his parents because he was very jiggly like Jello and seemed to be inconsolable. And over time, he started developing life-threatening seizures. So it was then in 2007 that they began their search for a diagnosis. And in November, Matt spoke to the Undiagnosed Diseases Network steering committee meeting, and now envision the scene. It's a giant, believe me, as the executive director, I'm in charge of making sure that the sequencing workflows go correctly, that, you know, people are getting consented properly. I'm also in charge of making sure we have a large enough U-shaped table to fit 70 people, and that we have enough coffee. So, which is the only time people in that room, even though like it seems like a marathon to us, these 2-day meetings, the only time people break a sweat in there, I can assure you, is if they overdo it on the Starbucks. So, having spoken to Matt several times, I knew he was the break that we would need. You know, envision 70 people in a room, 2 days. We're talking about a lot of the organizational things that I'd like to mention because they are part and parcel of getting this network running, getting our IRB approvals in, data sharing agreements, all of this stuff that maybe is considered to be boring, but I'd like to mention it because when people ask me, why aren't you up and running yet? And I jokingly say, well, we're eating bonbons, you know. But in fact, we're doing all of this, really, this groundwork that's necessary to forge a cohesive community. And so I thought, well, we need a break from that. And I thought, Matt is gonna be the guy. And Matt stood up there, and people are looking at their cell phones and typing on their computers and you know, waging the endless battle against email. And then Matt showed a picture of Bertrand, and everybody closed their computers, put their cell phones down, and listened. And it was really an education for all of us. And what I learned, the first thing I learned was that Bertrand is so loved. It was really a beautiful thing to see how much he is loved. And the second thing I learned is that it's really very, very lonely to have an undiagnosed disease or to love somebody with an undiagnosed disease. And you know, I'm kind of a dork, so I was reminded of the John Donne poem that said, you know, Matt said to us, it's like being on an island. And so I thought, you know, no man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent, part of the main. And I like those words because it makes me feel safe. And I think in times of struggle, we all like to feel like we're interconnected, like we're not on our own personal islands. And that's not at all how it feels to have an undiagnosed disease from the people I've spoken to. Matt described it as an island. There's a woman named Katja Moritz. She's producing a film called Undiagnosed, Medical Refugees. It's a very compelling trailer if you've seen it online. She also has 2 children with Gaucher's disease as well. So Katja has an undiagnosed disease, and she describes it as being a medical refugee. So I'm hearing from these people the same thing, that it's like, you're alone, you're isolated, you're separated from the rest of humanity. And at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, part of what we're going to try to do is to really think about the patient experience, so that with the help of our rare diseases community partners, so that we can make sure that these people know that while they may be unique or very rare, they're not alone, that we're there to try and help them find their diagnosis and help find their communities. And so it was a long time for Matt and his family to come to a diagnosis. They started out at a developmental specialist in 2008 who ruled out all the usual suspects and a number of very unusual suspects. Now, Bertrand was born in 2007. In 2010, Bertrand was enrolled in a novel sequencing study for children with developmental delays at Duke, which is one of our Undiagnosed Diseases Network sites. Now, time went by, they were analyzing Bertrand's data, and in 2012, that's 2 years after he entered the study, they contacted Matt and his family and said, we're not sure, but we think we have a clue. There are some problems in a gene for NGLY1, which is involved in metabolism. I'm sure some people in here know more than I do about it. Matt certainly does. Oh, he took us to school during that lecture. It made me understand how people with rare conditions really become the experts, and it was very humbling. And so they told him, they said, we can't be sure because he is the first patient we've ever seen with this. But from what we know about this gene, it seems to align with his symptoms. And so Matt and his family are very social media savvy. And so they went on their blog and they announced, they said, we finally have an answer, something to easily say when people ask about Bertrand. And as more NGLY1 children are found, we will no longer be alone. And Matt described it in the room. He said, clearly the best days of my life are when my 3 children have been born. He said, but this was the next best day of my life, the day they told me that they had a good lead. And so I began to really appreciate that for those with rare and undiagnosed diseases, finding a community is transformative. So they told Matt, they said, well, we think, Bertrand is the first case, but we think there are more out there. And we think there could be, at least a handful, maybe 20 or 30 cases out there. And so Matt again turned to social media, as you might have read in a New Yorker article, and he put up an essay that was called Hunting Down My Son's Killer. And he dotted it with keywords. He's a computer scientist. That would make it easy to find if you were searching it. And Matt's a real advocate for turning social media into an almost clinical tool to find second cases. And within 5 days, they found 2 other cases, and because of this blog post. And to this day, they found 15 others. And they forged this incredible community. I mean, they obviously support each other, but they're also advancing the science. One parent found a compound that seems to have raised the quality of life of these children. That they don't produce tears, and somehow I think it's a vitamin supplement they give, and suddenly they begin producing tears and moods improve. And so they're conducting, their own sort of trials given available information. And they're quite savvy, and they're advised by a team of researchers that they fund. And another found was, searching through the medical literature and the scientific literature, and found a novel fluorescent assay that's become fundamental in the functional analysis of NGLY1. And the patient found it and introduced it to the researchers. So from that, I learned that patients are really, and their families are really powerful partners. They can be, they're almost an extension of the research team is how we're viewing that at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And The other thing is Matt, when he came to see us, our steering committee meeting was in Washington, D.C. And Matt added on an extra day because there was one of the NY1 children was being seen at the NIH, and she was there with her mom. Her mom's a single mom to this child with NY1, and so this community has been a real support to her because as you go through these research studies, it's very intensive, and so Matt was there to support her as she and her child went through this program. And this research study at the NIH is interesting because it turns out that another thing about the NY1 patients is that they have an unusual resistance to viral infections. They just don't get sick the way normal people do. And so what they're studying at the NIH is what the mechanism of this could be. So at the end of his blog post of Hunting Down My Son's Killer, Matt said, this is a story about the kind of hope that only science can provide. And when I heard that, I thought, well, it's not just hope for people with undiagnosed diseases, it's hope for all of us, because often people with undiagnosed diseases hold clues to the deepest mysteries of our health and physiology. So it was a really long road from when Matt and Christina first suspected something was wrong with their jiggly baby to when they knew what was. It was really taxing emotionally, physically, and financially. That is where the Running for Rare Fund comes in, because this is a big topic at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Steering Committee. How do we level the playing field? How do we make sure that nobody is left on their island for financial reasons? And so your ears were probably burning. It was sometime in November. And because this fund really did keep coming up. And when I see the number of runners, of course, you know, as the executive director, I'm thinking, cha-ching, right? Because I think, how many patients can we help support? So, when Phil and when Pam reached out to me and said, would you come speak here, I jumped at the chance, even though I went into science because I'm a complete introvert and really dislike public speaking. But I couldn't miss the chance to tell you in person how really grateful I am that by raising these funds to ensure that everybody has access to the network, you yourselves are becoming an integral part of the network. And I want to invite you, of course, we're in Boston. One of the clinical sites is in Boston. We're happy to have visitors at any time if you'd like to come see what we're doing at the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And you are really helping us to make that last part of the bridge to the island to get people off and into their community. And for that, I thank you. And the fact that there are so many of you sitting here really just strengthens my resolve to do everything I can to make sure that we find as many diagnoses for these patients as possible. Thank you so, so, so much.
Okay, so for our last speaker in this session, no, I'm not emotional, Rachel, jeez. I have the privilege of introducing my patient partner from last year, a friend of mine. I'm sorry. Eileen and I went to college together at Providence, and that was a long time ago. I know, you're studying now too. And so I've been a part of this team on the board for several years, and last year, 2 years ago, Phil ran for a member of the Niemann-Pick A community, a little boy named Wilder. And I posted a blog post by Phil highlighting the fact that he was running a 100-mile race for the children with Niemann-Pick A, and he had his angels. And I posted that on my Facebook page, and a friend of mine called me and said, did you know that Eileen has a daughter who has Niemann-Pick A? And I didn't know that at the time. So I reached out to her, and it turns out that she knew already about our organization, but she didn't know that I was part of the organization. And so we connected, and I learned about Quinn and about the amazing things that Brett and Eileen were doing to support their daughter. And I asked her to be my patient partner. And in that time between when I spoke with her and when the next season started, her daughter passed away. And so I ran in memory of Quinn. But she and her husband and their boys were an amazing, amazing family last year to partner with. They were, you know, a wonderful part of the team, and they've gone on to do some great things in memory of their daughter. And so Eileen is back here today with us from New York. She drove in today to be a part of this event, and we're very, very grateful that she did. So with that, I'd like to introduce Eileen Linzer.
I cried last year, and I swore I wouldn't do it this year, so blame Kai if it happens. As Kai said, my name is Eileen Linzer. I'm very honored to be standing here as a returning patient partner family with the illustrious Kai Simon as our runner for the second year in a row. Our patient, as Kai said, is my daughter, Quinn, not me, who passed away on August 9th of 2013 from Niemann-Pick disease type A. Quinn was 1 week shy of her 15-month birthday. Niemann-Pick disease type A is also known as acid sphingomyelinase deficiency, or ASMD. It's an extremely rare lysosomal storage disorder which causes neurodegeneration. The science of it, quickly, is that the children produce less than 1% of the enzyme acid sphingomyelinase, which is required to break down lipids or fats. These fats then are stored in all the major, all of our cells, but in causing cell death, and malfunction of the major organ systems, mainly the liver, the spleen, the lungs, and ultimately the brain. The reality of it is that the NPA leads to an early death, anywhere from 15 months to 3+ years, or in Quinn's case, less than 15 months. And before they are gone, these children are taken from their families by way of severe developmental retardation and regression. There is no treatment and there is no cure. NPA is an autosomal recessive genetic disease, one that affects approximately 3 to 4 American children a year, making the incidence rate, which is actually, because it is so low, not computed, but being a bit of a nerd myself, I did the computations, and it's about 1 in 1.3 million births. Our NPA community, because of this, is a tiny one, but we are fierce. 2 foundations have arisen in the past 18 months to battle this disease: Wild Donation Foundation and our own Quinn Madeline Inc. Wild Donation, besides being run by the 2 most knowledgeable lay people, I don't even think they qualify as that any longer, on the planet, Stephen and Shannon Laffoon, also has the distinction of having introduced my family to the amazing Running for Rare Diseases team. And as Kai said, via the bizarro world that is Facebook, we figured out these connections with the amazing Phil Madeira, who was running 2012 for Wilder, worked and ran alongside Kai, who I went to college with and did college things with. Sorry. It had been, sorry, I'm not so good at memorizing, so it's all written down. It had been 12 years since Kai and I had seen each other, and until basically that moment, we really hadn't even connected via social media. While we may be a sort of extreme case, it is important that you all see what happens as far as the community building and these connections. This community, this rare disease community, is very small, and yet it is global, and it's so big and so sometimes overwhelming. Overwhelming for the patients, for their families, and for their running partners, I would imagine. The relationships we all build with one another, and you build with your partners, help bring that world back to one that is manageable. When I learned last year that the money raised was going to support a fund for undiagnosed families, I thought, oh, that's nice. Because really, no matter how evolved we all have had to become in this community, we're still human and a bit self-involved. That self-involvement may now involve a larger cause and even more people, but it is still pretty specific to our own world. But then that world gets opened a bit more. I want to talk to you about Adam. Adam is the son of a peripheral friend, someone who is friends of a friend. Adam is 4. He loves climbing trees, he loves Chuck E. Cheese, and fighting with his sister because he's 4. Adam can do none of those things any longer. He was a perfectly healthy 4-year-old, and since August, Adam has had 15 strokes. He was initially diagnosed with central central nervous system vasculitis. These are by some of the top hospitals in New York. He has been transferred to CHOP. They also went with the diagnosis. He's responding to no treatments, and they now have removed the diagnosis, and he is an undiagnosed case. Having had 15 strokes, losing the loss, the loss of sight in his right eye, his left arm, his left leg, he's unable to move at this point. So as you can imagine, the situation is pretty critical at this point. We can't treat something that we don't know what it is. Sometimes we can't treat something that we know what it is. So I've lived that. But if you can't even figure it out, if we don't even know what it is, there is no hope. Now you guys are certainly running for your patient partners, and you're bringing awareness to these diseases and the individuals that are dealing with them. But you're also doing something even greater. What you're doing is you're running for hope. And not in this weirdo, esoteric sort of way. I mean, honest to God, real life hope. You're running because you're raising awareness, raising money, raising hope that there will be a name to these illnesses someday or even today, because you can't fight what you don't know is there. So, as you're training through the dreary Boston winter, leaving your footprints in the snow and running miles just to warm your numb thighs, remember all of this. You are running for something greater, and not just greater than yourself, but greater than all of us. You're running for hope, and that is the greatest gift of all.
Okay, well, I think that brings this portion of our event to a close. I want to thank all of our speakers. Shauna, I don't know how you got up here and spoke so calmly, because it's not easy. So for those in the rare disease community, thank you so much for taking the drive out tonight. We're really excited to meet you and see you again, and we look forward to a wonderful marathon season. And hopefully it won't be the dinner before we see you all again. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you soon. Take care.